Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from Tuscany. I'm looking at some wines from a Chianti producer. This is Castello di Albola, and this is their Santa Caterina, and this is a Chianti Classico Gran Selezione. So the Gran Selezione, the sort of top tier of Chianti Classicos, made from exceptional sites, sometimes only released in the best vintages, so looking to be the top layer of quality for Chianti. Now, the estate Castello di Albola, located in the village of Radda, sits right at the heart of the Chianti Classico region. So in a relatively high altitude area, the vineyards lie between 350 and 550 metres above sea level. And also an estate with a long history. There are records of the estate dating back to the 11th century, and certainly by the 1500s, winemaking was established here, and it was a site that was owned by various of Tuscany's noble families who built the castle there, obviously. So you have families such as the Pazzi family and the Ginori family, and ownership passed between these noble houses right up until 1979, when Prince Giovanni Ginori Conti sold the estate to the Zonin family. Zonin are a family-owned company from the Veneto, large wine producers there with very good international distribution. So they bought the estate, and in the succeeding 45 years have continued to invest in it to ensure that it stayed as a state-of-the-art facility. So they've completely rebuilt cellars and barrel halls. There's gleaming stainless steel fermentation equipment throughout the estate. Now, the estate has quite a large range of wines. They have several different brands of Chianti Classico. They have Chianti Reserva, and in fact they've got two Gran Selezione Chianti Classicos. This particular wine comes from a single 5-hectare site. It's 100% Sangiovese. The site is at 550 metres above sea level, so it's one of their higher sites. So this is somewhere where the altitude can moderate the temperature. It's a relatively warm region, but the fact that they're 550 metres above sea level ensures that you get cool nights so that the vines and the fruit can cool down again. So the vine doesn't get too hot, so it's not respiring acidity. So you can get good ripeness in the wine, but still retain good freshness. This is a south-facing site, and it has what they call Galesto soils. So this is a clay soil with quite a large proportion of schist rock in it. So I'm assuming the clay will be very good at retaining moisture in seasons where there's drought, and the schist, the rock content in the soil, will be helpful in absorbing daytime heat and reflecting it back at the plant to aid ripening. The estate in total has somewhere in the region of 125 hectares of vines. Now, winemaking is very traditional. Everything will be hand-picked. These are hillside sites, so that's pretty much the norm. Fermentation goes ahead in temperature-controlled stainless steel tanks, and they probably will use temperature both to warm the must up to start fermentation fairly promptly, but also to stop it from getting too hot later on in the fermentation. Batting goes on for 3 weeks, so you get 3 weeks, not just of fermentation, but of the skins macerating in the juice and the wine. Once malolactic conversion has been completed in tank, the wine is then put into barrel. Now, 50% of it goes into French oak barriques, and 50%, I'm told, goes into Slavonian oak barrels. Now, there's not a huge difference in terms of flavour coming from Slavonian oak and French oak, because they're both sessile oaks. They're both the same species of oak, likely. So the difference here, I think, is referring to the fact that one will be barriques, so 225 litre barrels, probably with a proportion of new barrels, a reasonable proportion, 25% and upwards. Whereas I think what they're implying is that the Slavonian oak is likely to be larger and older, so it'd be seasoned oak, so not giving oak flavours, but more allowing air into the wine gently to allow tannins to polymerise and to allow colour to fix and just to give stability to the wine. So we're talking about a relatively gentle oak influence here. And the wine will stay for 14 months in those two different sorts of oak. At the end of that time, it's bottled, and the wine then stays in bottle in the cellars here for a further 18 months prior to it being released. This is a 2016, so obviously it spent more time in barrel than that. So let's have a look at it, shall we? Just to start, I've also tried their Chianti Classico recently, and that was quite vividly purple. This, by comparison, almost sort of has almost has brick red notes to the rim. So there's a much more developed colour there. The wine's got 14% alcohol, and it is sticking to the sides of the glass fairly readily. We're slowly forming some quite heavy tears there. So let's see what we make with the aromas, shall we? The aromas have notes of development, they have notes of powerful fruit, and they also have savoury notes. So there are notes of sort of forest floor development, there's notes of quite ripe, perhaps red plum, through to fresh, lively, juicy red cherry notes. And when I'm talking about savoury notes, I suppose I'm talking about things like bitter licorice, a richness, almost pointing at a sort of a meatiness there. There isn't particularly obvious oak at this stage. Perhaps there's a slightly jammy touch to the red fruit as well. So let's have a taste. The wine is very harmonious. All its elements sit beautifully together. There's a very firm drying tannin, and there's a very fresh acidity. So you've got this sort of fine, slightly grainy nature, maybe slightly dusty note to the tannins on the front palate, and they're interacting with that good acidity. And I'm getting quite a mouth-watering, juicy, very sort of plush, smooth note on the front palate. There's a juiciness that's almost sort of like a red cherries. The smoothness, almost like sort of sweet licorice note, touches of anise there. There's a nice complexity. Behind all that, you've got this sort of red cherry to red plum fruit with just a hint of meatiness behind it. I think that's just that sort of start of development. It hasn't quite got to a mushroomy note of bottle development yet, but it's sort of heading towards that more savoury note of development. Not quite earthy, more towards that sort of dried leaves, forest floor sort of note of development there. The acidity is leaving it quite well focused. You've got a sort of a juicy red plum element on the finish there, sort of giving some red fruit that has some nice length. The freshness is good, the structure, it's a medium-bodied wine, maybe medium to full-bodied. There's some quite good grip, but it's not dryingly astringent. There is a drying nature to the tannin, but there's that sort of rich, red plummy fruit alongside it that's balancing that quite nicely. The alcohol doesn't seem particularly high. I mean, 14% is what the label says it is. I should imagine that might be 13.8, 13.9. And there's enough fruit to stop that from seeming hot, alcoholic. Certainly it doesn't feel alcoholic on the finish. The oak is really quite restrained. I mean, yes, you've got those tannins, but there aren't necessarily the cedary flavours on the finish or anything like that. So a wine with lovely balance, some lovely finesse in terms of its structure and its freshness, and probably with the ability to age for another 10 years or so. I mean, I wouldn't put this in the top league of Gran Selezione wines by any chance, but at the same time, this is a well-made wine. I had a look at the Wine Searcher aggregated score for this vintage, and that rates this as a 92. You know, good to very good, not heading up to a sort of a level of excellence. Very enjoyable drinking at the moment, nice and open. Probably will mellow a little more and gain a little complexity over the next 4 or 5 years. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, the best answer is to sign up and subscribe to our channel, and that way you can set yourself a notification every time we publish a new video. I'll leave a link in the notes below to our page for this vintage of this wine on the Wine Searcher website. That way you can see pricing and availability near you and other background details, price history, the critics' notes, and all the other background information that we put in there for you to see. If you have any comments, please leave those in the box below. We'd love to know what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to this. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and I do hope you'll be able to join us again for another tasting in the very near future. Bye for now.